In November of 1963, the United States military was preparing to order 104,000 new rifles. It was a massive $13.5 million contract split between the Army and the Air Force. But there was a sticking point, a $4.50 spring-loaded plunger sitting on the right side of the receiver, the forward assist. The rifle's designer, Eugene Stoner, didn't want it there. He had engineered a lightweight, gas-operated weapon that was supposed to represent a clean break from the past, a precision machine that didn't need heavy manual overrides. The Army's ordnance officers disagreed. Their infantrymen were trained on weapons like the M1 Garand and the M14. Those older rifles communicated through mass and leverage. If a cartridge failed to seat, doctrine dictated that you use the palm of your hand to physically shove the action closed. Stoner's new architecture didn't give the shooter that mechanical feedback. His argument was direct. If the bolt won't close, you don't force a round into a fouled chamber. You clear the jam and try again. The Army refused to accept that answer. They demanded the manual bolt closure device anyway. 85,000 rifles went to the Army with the new button. 19,000 went to the Air Force without it. That small mechanical addition marked the exact moment the rifle stopped belonging to its inventor. It belonged to the institution now, and the military was about to spend the next 3 decades hacking the design to solve completely different problems. By 1966, the operating environment had shifted. Soldiers were deploying from helicopters, moving through dense jungle, and riding in tight vehicle compartments. In those spaces, a nearly 39-inch infantry rifle becomes a geometric liability. It catches on everything. Colt's answer was to aggressively cut the weapon down. They reduced the barrel to 10 inches, creating a compact variant known as the M16’s. It was built specifically for special operations units and pilots who needed to keep their weapons close to their bodies. But shortening the gas system and the barrel created severe physical side effects. The 10-inch barrel produced a muzzle blast intense enough to disorient the person pulling the trigger, and a flash bright enough to instantly blind their night vision. To keep the weapon usable, Colt engineered a proprietary sound moderator. It wasn't designed for covert operations. It was a mandatory piece of damage control bolted to the muzzle to diffuse the massive report and flash the short barrel generated. That ad hoc fix established a new baseline. It proved the military could successfully shrink the receiver. The lessons learned from taming the M16’s geometry would eventually serve as the direct foundation for the M4 carbine carried by modern infantry today. While the Special Forces were shrinking the barrel, the Army was developing an entirely different requirement for the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. They wanted troops to engage external targets while the vehicle was moving. Aiming a standard rifle through a tiny hull port is physically impossible. The solution was the M231. Structurally, it looked somewhat like an M16, but its mechanics were totally alien. It fired from an open bolt to prevent overheating, and it cycled at an absurd 1,200 rounds per minute. It also had no sights. None. The intended operating procedure was to load tracer ammunition, shove the muzzle through the vehicle's firing port, and blindly walk the stream of fire onto a target by watching through a periscope. Eventually, the Army removed the stock entirely. The practical reason was to make the weapon incredibly difficult to use dismounted. The military modified the physical architecture to physically confine the rifle to the hull, ensuring soldiers followed doctrine. For the Navy SEALs, the environment destroying the rifle was saltwater. Taking a standard M16 on a sustained dive was dangerous. The hollow buffer tube in the stock would trap water, preventing the action from cycling when the operator surfaced. The engineering fix for the Mark IV Mod 0 variant was remarkably blunt. Armorers drilled a 1/4-inch hole directly into the buffer assembly. That simple modification allowed the weapon to drain instantly on the way up from a 200-foot dive. But the Navy didn't stop at waterproofing. They had a much deeper disagreement with the Army over exactly how a soldier should pull the trigger. In the 1980s, Army data suggested that uncontrolled automatic fire simply wasted ammunition without increasing hits. To fix this, they mandated the M16A2, which replaced full auto capability with a mechanical 3-round burst. The Navy looked at the exact same battlefield data and reached the opposite conclusion. For a SEAL clearing a hostile ship corridor, 3-round burst wasn't enough. They quietly procured a separate variant, the M16A3, whose only real distinction was putting full automatic fire back on the selector switch. The American military inventory now held nearly identical-looking rifles that operated according to completely contradictory theories of combat. The platform's original architecture was simply flexible enough to absorb both. By the late 1990s, decades of these niche experiments converged. Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane developed the Mk-18, utilizing a 10.3-inch barrel designed explicitly for highly confined spaces like stairwells and ship hatches. It wasn't built from scratch. It was the direct accumulation of gas system knowledge gained from the old XM-177s, dropped directly onto recycled, decades-old lower receivers pulled from naval storage. The M16 survived precisely because it stopped being a single rifle. It became a blank canvas, an architectural baseline that could be chopped, flooded, silenced, and hacked to fit whatever peculiar crisis the military threw at it. Which brings the story back to that $4.50 spring-loaded plunger. Today, it still rests firmly on the side of modern variants. The Air Force didn't want it, the weapon's creator argued against it, but it remains there, a permanent mechanical fossil of the very first time the institution told the inventor that his blueprints were only a suggestion.